The October wind carried the scent of dying leaves and distant snow as Marcus Sullivan rode through the cottonwood grove that bordered his property. His weathered hands gripped the reins loosely, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the missing cattle that had wandered off during the night. The sun hung low in the western sky, painting the Colorado Territory landscape in shades of amber and rust. Marcus had been tracking the strays for most of the afternoon, following hoof prints that led deeper into the wild country beyond his ranch. At 42, he had learned to read the land like scripture, every broken twig and disturbed stone telling its own story. But today, something felt different. The usual sounds of the wilderness seemed muted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. His horse, a sturdy brown mare named Copper, suddenly stopped and snorted nervously. Her ears pricked forward, focused on something Marcus could not yet see. He dismounted quietly, tying the reins to a low branch, and moved forward on foot. The undergrowth crackled softly beneath his boots as he pushed through a thicket of wild rose bushes, their thorns catching at his worn leather jacket. That was when he saw her. High up in the massive oak tree that dominated the clearing, about 15 feet from the ground, a young woman lay curled on a thick branch. Her long black hair hung down like a dark waterfall, swaying gently in the breeze. She wore traditional Apache clothing, a buckskin dress decorated with intricate beadwork that caught the fading sunlight. Her moccasined feet were tucked beneath her, and her arms were wrapped around the branch as if embracing it. Marcus stood perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. She appeared to be sleeping, her chest rising and falling in the slow rhythm of deep slumber. Her face, turned slightly toward him, showed the sharp cheekbones and bronze skin of her Apache heritage. She looked young, perhaps 18 or 19, with a peaceful expression that seemed almost childlike in its innocence. But what struck Marcus most was not her beauty or her precarious position. It was the fact that she was alone, sleeping in a tree miles from any settlement, with winter approaching and no visible supplies or shelter nearby. Something was wrong with this picture, something that made his protective instincts flare to life. He had lived on the frontier long enough to know that Apache women did not simply sleep in trees without good reason. The ongoing conflicts between the army and various Apache bands had made the territory a dangerous place for anyone of native blood. If she was here, hiding like this, it meant she was running from something or someone. Marcus cleared his throat softly, not wanting to startle her into falling. The sound seemed to echo in the quiet grove, but she did not stir. He tried again, a little louder this time. "Miss," he called gently. "Miss, you all right up there?" Her eyes snapped open instantly, dark and alert. In one fluid motion, she pressed herself against the trunk of the tree, her body tense and ready to flee. She stared down at him with the wary expression of a wild animal caught in the open, her breathing quick and shallow. Marcus raised his hands slowly, palms outward in the universal gesture of peace. He took a careful step backward, giving her space. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and calm. "I am not here to hurt you. I was just looking for some lost cattle when I saw you up there." She continued to watch him without speaking, her dark eyes never leaving his face. Marcus could see the exhaustion in her features now, the hollow look of someone who had not eaten or slept properly in days. Her dress was torn in several places, and there were scratches on her arms that looked fresh. "You hurt?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. "You look like you might need some help." Still no response. She shifted her weight slightly on the branch, and Marcus noticed how she favored her left ankle. She was injured, though trying to hide it. "My name is Marcus Sullivan," he continued, settling down on a fallen log to make himself appear less threatening. "I got a ranch about 3 miles from here. Nothing fancy, but it is warm and dry, and I got food if you are hungry." The girl tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that made him feel as if she was looking straight through to his soul. There was intelligence in those dark eyes, and something else he could not quite identify. Not fear exactly, but a deep caution born of hard experience. "You speak English?" Marcus asked. She nodded once, barely perceptible. "Good. That makes things easier." He leaned back against a tree trunk, trying to appear relaxed and non-threatening. "I am guessing you did not climb up there just for the view. Someone after you?" This time her nod was more definite, and Marcus saw her jaw tighten. "Soldiers?" Another nod. Marcus felt his own jaw clench. He had little love for the army and their heavy-handed tactics when it came to dealing with the native tribes. Too many good people had died on both sides of that particular conflict, and it seemed like every month brought news of another massacre or raid. "Well," he said after a moment, "I reckon they are not likely to come looking for you at my place. I keep to myself and they keep to themselves. Most of the time, anyway." The girl continued to watch him, but some of the tension seemed to leave her shoulders. Marcus could see her calculating, weighing her options. She was smart enough to know that she could not stay in that tree forever, especially with winter coming on. The nights were already getting cold, and snow was not far off. "Tell you what," Marcus said, rising slowly to his feet. "I am going to go back and get my horse. Then I am going to head home. If you want to come with me, you are welcome. If not, I understand. But I will not feel right riding off and leaving you out here with no shelter and winter coming on." He started to turn away, then paused and looked back up at her. "My word is good," he said simply. "I will not hurt you, and I will not turn you over to anyone who means you harm. That is a promise." Without waiting for a response, Marcus walked back through the thicket to where Copper waited. He untied the reins and swung up into the saddle, then guided the mare back toward the clearing. When he reached the edge of the grove, he pulled up and looked back at the oak tree. The girl was climbing down, moving carefully, but with obvious skill. She dropped the last few feet to the ground and stood there for a moment, testing her injured ankle. Then she looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw something other than wariness in her expression. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying just a trace of an accent. Marcus nodded and extended his hand down to her. After a moment's hesitation, she took it, and he helped her swing up behind him on the horse. She settled herself on Copper's back, her hands gripping the saddle rather than holding on to Marcus himself. "What should I call you?" he asked as they started toward his ranch. "Ayanna," she replied, so quietly he almost missed it. "Ayanna," he repeated, liking the sound of it. "That is a pretty name. What does it mean?" "Eternal Blossom," she said, and he could hear the slight smile in her voice. They rode in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower in the sky, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Marcus found himself acutely aware of her presence behind him, the way she moved with the horse's rhythm, the warmth of her body against his back. There was something about her that stirred feelings he had thought long buried. Marcus had been alone for 3 years now, ever since his wife Sarah died in childbirth along with their son. He had thrown himself into his work, building up his ranch and his herd, telling himself that solitude was what he needed. But having Ayanna there, even under these circumstances, reminded him of what he had been missing. As they crested the ridge that overlooked his property, Marcus felt a familiar surge of pride. The ranch was not large by some standards, but it was his, built with his own hands and sweat. The main house was solid log construction with a stone chimney, surrounded by a barn, corral, and several outbuildings. Smoke was already rising from the chimney, thanks to the banked fire he had left that morning. "This is it," he said, gesturing toward the spread below them. "Not much to look at maybe, but it is home." Ayanna did not respond, but he felt her straighten behind him as she took in the view. He wondered what she was thinking, whether the sight of a white man's ranch brought back bad memories of raids and conflicts. There was so much history between their peoples, so much blood and mistrust. They rode down the slope and into the yard, where Marcus helped Ayanna dismount before taking care of Copper. He noticed that she stood awkwardly, clearly favoring that injured ankle, but she made no complaint. Her dark eyes took in every detail of the ranch buildings, the corral where his other horses stood, watching curiously, the neat rows of his vegetable garden. "Come on inside," Marcus said, leading the way to the house. "I will get a fire going and fix us something to eat." The interior of the house was simple but comfortable, with handmade furniture and colorful rugs on the wooden floors. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, while the kitchen area occupied another corner. There was a loft overhead where Marcus slept, and a small bedroom on the ground floor that had been intended for children who never came. Ayanna moved carefully through the space, her eyes taking in the details. Marcus noticed how she paused at the framed photograph on the mantelpiece, a wedding portrait of him and Sarah from 8 years ago. "My wife," he said quietly. "She died 3 years back." Ayanna nodded, her expression softening with understanding. Loss was something she clearly knew well. Marcus busied himself building up the fire and putting a pot of stew onto heat. He had learned to cook for himself after Sarah's death, though his skills were basic at best. The stew was from a batch he had made earlier in the week, thick with beef and vegetables from his garden. "You can use the bedroom," he said, nodding toward the small room. "I will sleep out here by the fire." Ayanna shook her head. "I do not wish to take your bed." "It is not my bed," Marcus replied. "I sleep upstairs. That room has been empty for years." She studied his face, as if trying to read the truth in his expression. Finally, she nodded. "You are very kind," she said. "I do not know why you help me." Marcus ladled stew into 2 bowls and handed her one, along with a chunk of bread he had baked that morning. "Maybe because it is the right thing to do," he said. "Maybe because I know what it is like to be alone." They ate in comfortable silence, the fire crackling in the hearth, and the wind whistling softly around the eaves of the house. Outside, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. After they finished eating, Marcus showed Ayanna to the bedroom. It was small but clean, with a comfortable bed and a chest of drawers that held some of Sarah's old clothes. He had never been able to bring himself to get rid of them, and now he was glad. "There are some dresses in there that might fit you," he said, nodding toward the chest. "Help yourself to whatever you need." Ayanna looked at him with surprise. "You would give me your wife's clothes?" "I think she would have wanted them to be used," Marcus replied. "No sense in them just sitting there gathering dust." For the first time since he had found her, Ayanna smiled. It transformed her entire face, making her look younger and more beautiful than he had thought possible. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Marcus nodded and started to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Ayanna," he said, "what happened? Why were the soldiers after you?" Her smile faded, and the wariness returned to her eyes. "My village was attacked," she said quietly. "Many died. I escaped, but they say I killed a soldier. I did not, but they do not believe Apache words." Marcus felt anger flare in his chest. He had heard too many stories like this one, innocent people caught up in the violence and hatred that seemed to infect everyone it touched. "Well," he said, "you are safe here. Get some rest. We can talk more tomorrow." He closed the door gently and made his way back to the main room, where he banked the fire and settled down in his chair with a cup of coffee. Outside, the wind was picking up, rattling the windows and reminding him that winter was not far away. As he sat there in the quiet house, Marcus found himself thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. This morning he had been a lonely rancher looking for lost cattle. Tonight, he was harboring a fugitive Apache woman who had quite literally dropped out of a tree into his life. He should have been worried about the consequences, about what would happen if the army came looking for her. But instead, he found himself hoping that she would stay, at least until the weather turned warmer. The house felt different with her in it, more alive somehow, as if her presence had awakened something that had been sleeping for too long. In the bedroom, Ayanna sat on the edge of the bed, looking through the clothes in the chest. The dresses were well made and carefully preserved, and she could see the love that had gone into their creation. Some were simple work dresses, others more elaborate, clearly intended for special occasions. She selected a simple blue dress and held it up to herself, studying her reflection in the small mirror above the chest. It would fit, she thought, though it would be strange to wear white woman's clothing. But her own dress was torn and dirty, and she was grateful for the chance to have something clean to wear. As she prepared for bed, Ayanna found herself thinking about the man who had saved her. Marcus Sullivan was not what she had expected from a white rancher. He was kind and gentle, with none of the harsh arrogance she had come to associate with his people. His eyes were honest, and his words seemed to carry weight, but she had learned to be cautious. Trust was a luxury she could not afford, not with soldiers hunting her and winter approaching. She would stay here for a few days, long enough to rest and let her ankle heal, and then she would move on. It was safer for both of them that way. Outside, the wind continued to howl, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the lonesome call of a wolf. But for the first time in weeks, Ayanna felt truly safe. The bed was soft and warm, and the house was solid around her, a shelter against the storms that raged both outside and within her heart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions to make. But tonight, she would rest, and for a few precious hours, she would allow herself to imagine what it might be like to have a real home again. Dawn came quietly to the ranch, painting the eastern mountains in soft shades of pink and gold. Marcus woke to the sound of movement in the kitchen, the quiet clatter of dishes and the whisper of bare feet on wooden floors. For a moment, he lay still in his loft bed, listening to sounds he had not heard in his house for 3 years. When he climbed down the ladder, he found Ayanna at the stove, stirring something in a pot. She had changed into the blue dress, and her long hair was braided back in a single plait that hung down her back. The transformation was startling. Dressed in Sarah's clothes, she looked almost like any other frontier woman, except for the inherent grace in her movements and the wariness that never quite left her eyes. "You did not have to cook," Marcus said, running a hand through his tousled hair. "I wanted to," Ayanna replied without turning around. "You have been kind. It is little I can do." The smell coming from the pot was unlike anything Marcus had smelled before, rich and earthy with herbs he could not identify. When Ayanna ladled it into bowls, he saw that she had somehow transformed his basic supplies into something that looked and smelled like a feast. "What is it?" he asked, taking a tentative taste. The flavors exploded on his tongue, complex and satisfying in a way that his simple cooking never achieved. "Corn mush with wild herbs," Ayanna said. "My grandmother taught me. She said food is medicine for the spirit as well as the body." They ate in comfortable silence as the sun climbed higher, sending shafts of golden light through the windows. Marcus found himself stealing glances at her, noting the way the morning light brought out copper highlights in her dark hair, the graceful way she moved, even while sitting still. "Your ankle," he said eventually. "How does it feel this morning?" Ayanna flexed her foot experimentally. "Better. The rest helped." "Good. But you should still be careful with it for a few days." She nodded, then looked at him seriously. "I cannot stay long. It is not safe for you." "Let me worry about that," Marcus replied. "Besides, look outside." Ayanna turned toward the window, and her eyes widened. During the night, the first snow of the season had fallen, covering the landscape in a thick white blanket. The mountains were completely obscured by low-hanging clouds, and fat flakes continued to drift down from the gray sky. "Early storm," Marcus said. "Probably last a few days, maybe more. Nobody will be traveling in this weather, not even the army." Ayanna stared out at the snow with an expression Marcus could not read. He wondered if she had ever seen so much snow before, or if the sight brought back memories of other winters, other storms. "You have never been through a mountain winter," Marcus observed. "No," she admitted. "My people, we move south when the cold comes. We do not stay in one place when the spirits of ice wake up." Marcus smiled at her phrasing. "Well, the spirits of ice are definitely awake now. Good thing you have a warm place to wait them out." Over the next several days, the storm continued to rage outside while inside the house. An odd sort of domesticity developed. Ayanna seemed determined to earn her keep, taking over the cooking and cleaning with quiet efficiency. Her meals were revelations to Marcus, who had grown accustomed to his own plain fare. She could take the simplest ingredients and transform them into something magical. In return, Marcus found himself teaching her things about ranch life, showing her how the various tools worked, explaining the needs of the animals. She was a quick learner, absorbing information with the intensity of someone who understood that knowledge could mean survival. On the third day of the storm, Marcus was repairing a bridle when he noticed Ayanna watching him work with fascination. "Would you like to try?" he asked, offering her the leather working tools. She nodded eagerly, and he guided her hands through the process of stitching the leather. Her fingers were nimble and sure, and she picked up the technique quickly. As they worked side by side, their hands occasionally brushed, sending small jolts of awareness through Marcus that he tried to ignore. "Your wife," Ayanna said suddenly. "She was lucky to have you." Marcus paused in his stitching. "I was the lucky one. Sarah was too good for a rough man like me." "You are not rough," Ayanna said softly. "You are gentle, kind." She knew this. Their eyes met across the workbench, and Marcus felt something shift in the air between them. There was understanding there, and something deeper that made his heart race. But before either of them could speak, The sound of barking dogs broke the moment. Marcus was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. Through the swirling snow, he could see shapes moving toward the house. Riders, at least 4 of them, pushing through the storm with grim determination. "Soldiers," he said grimly, recognizing the blue uniforms even through the snow. Ayanna went pale, her hand flying to her throat. "They found me." "Not necessarily," Marcus said, his mind racing. "Could be they are just looking for shelter from the storm. Either way, you need to hide." He led her quickly to a storage room behind the kitchen, moving aside barrels and crates to reveal a small space beneath the floorboards. "Sarah's idea," he explained, as he helped her down into the hiding place. "Never know when you might need to hide something valuable." Ayanna looked up at him from the cramped space, her dark eyes wide with fear and something else he could not identify. "If they find me, you must say you know nothing," she said urgently. "Promise me." "Ayanna, promise me." "I promise," Marcus said, though the words tasted like ash in his mouth. He replaced the boards and arranged the crates to hide any sign of the hiding place, then went to answer the insistent pounding on his door. The soldiers were led by a young lieutenant with hard eyes and a mouth that seemed permanently set in a sneer. Snow clung to their uniforms and their horses steamed in the cold air. "Mr. Sullivan?" the lieutenant asked. "Lieutenant Hayes, 3rd Cavalry. We are tracking a dangerous Apache fugitive, and we need to search your property." "In this storm?" Marcus asked, stepping aside to let them enter. "You boys must be half frozen. Coffee?" "This is not a social call," Hayes replied curtly. "We have information that you may be harboring a fugitive, an Apache woman wanted for murder." Marcus kept his expression neutral, though inside his heart was pounding. "I have not seen any Apache woman, Lieutenant. I live alone here." Hayes studied him with suspicious eyes, then nodded to his men. They began searching the house methodically, overturning furniture and opening every door and cabinet. Marcus watched them tear apart his neat home, feeling anger build in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. The search took nearly an hour, during which the soldiers found nothing suspicious. Hayes seemed increasingly frustrated, clearly expecting to find evidence of Ayanna's presence. Finally, he turned back to Marcus with a cold smile. "Funny thing," Hayes said. "We found tracks leading this way before the snow covered them. Indian tracks. Lot of Indians in this territory," Marcus replied evenly. "Some of them friendly." "These were not friendly Indian tracks," Hayes said. "These belonged to a murderer, a savage who killed 3 good soldiers in cold blood." Marcus felt his jaw clench, but he kept his voice level. "Like I said, Lieutenant, I have not seen any Apache woman. If I had, I would have reported it." Hayes stared at him for a long moment, clearly wanting to push harder but lacking any evidence. Finally, he signaled to his men. "We will be watching this place," he said as they prepared to leave. "If you are lying to us, Mr. Sullivan, you will regret it." After they left, Marcus waited a full hour before releasing Ayanna from her hiding place. She emerged stiff and shaking, whether from cold or fear he could not tell. "They are gone," he said softly, helping her to her feet. "For now," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But they will be back. They will not give up." Marcus looked at her pale face and made a decision that would change everything. "Then we need to make sure they do not find anything when they return," he said. Over the next few weeks, as winter tightened its grip on the mountains, Marcus and Ayanna developed a routine that felt almost like a real life together. The soldiers returned twice more, but each time they found only a lonely rancher going about his business. Ayanna had become expert at disappearing at the first sign of approaching riders, but it was during the quiet times that their relationship truly deepened. In the evenings they would sit by the fire while Ayanna told him stories of her people, tales of coyote and raven, of spirits that lived in the mountains and rivers. Her voice would take on a musical quality as she spoke, painting pictures with words that made Marcus see the world through different eyes. In return, he taught her to read, using Sarah's old books and newspapers. Ayanna absorbed the written word with the same intensity she brought to everything else, her finger tracing the letters as she sounded out words. Soon she was reading entire passages aloud, her accent giving an exotic beauty to familiar words. "Why do you teach me this?" she asked one evening, as they worked through a particularly difficult passage. "Knowledge is power," Marcus replied. The more you know about their world, the better you can survive in it. But the truth was more complicated than that. Teaching her, watching her learn and grow, had become one of the greatest pleasures of his life. He loved the way her face lit up when she mastered a new concept, the questions she asked that made him see familiar things in new ways. As Christmas approached, Marcus found himself doing something he had not done since Sarah died. He began to hope. Hope that somehow they could make this work. Hope that the past could be forgiven, and a future built on something stronger than the hatred that divided their peoples. On Christmas Eve, he surprised Ayanna with a gift, a book of poetry that had belonged to Sarah, inscribed with a message he had written himself. For Ayanna, who taught me that home is not a place, but a feeling. Ayanna read the inscription twice, her eyes filling with tears. "I have nothing to give you," she said softly. "You have given me everything," Marcus replied, and meant it. That night, as snow fell softly outside the windows and the fire crackled in the hearth, they sat closer together than they ever had before. When Ayanna's hand found his, Marcus did not pull away. When she leaned against his shoulder, he wrapped his arms around her, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. "Marcus," she whispered, and the way she said his name was like a prayer. "I know," he said, understanding without words what she was trying to say. "I feel it too." The kiss that followed was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as years of loneliness and loss seemed to melt away in the warmth of human connection. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their hearts racing with possibility and fear. "This is dangerous," Ayanna said, though she made no move to pull away from him. "Everything worth having is dangerous," Marcus replied, stroking her hair. "Question is, are you willing to take the risk?" Instead of answering with words, she kissed him again, and in that moment, Marcus knew that whatever came next, his life would never be the same. As winter deepened and the new year arrived, their relationship continued to evolve. They were careful to maintain the pretense when anyone came around, but in the privacy of their home, they began to build something real and lasting. Ayanna moved her few belongings into the main room, and Marcus found excuses to delay his usual trips to town. But as much as they tried to create their own private world, the outside reality could not be held at bay forever. In February, a warm spell melted much of the snow, making travel possible again. And with the improved weather came renewed pressure from the army. Lieutenant Hayes appeared at the ranch with a larger patrol and a new attitude of grim determination. "Mr. Sullivan," he said without preamble, "I am going to search this property one more time, and if I find what I am looking for, you will hang alongside her." This time, the search was more thorough and more destructive. The soldiers tore apart everything, looking for hidden compartments and secret passages. They found the hiding place beneath the kitchen floor, though fortunately it was empty. "Interesting little hidey hole you have here," Hayes observed, kneeling beside the exposed space. "Every rancher has places to hide valuables," Marcus replied evenly. "Indians are not the only ones who steal." Hayes stood slowly, his hand resting on his sidearm. "I know she is here, Sullivan. Maybe not right now, but she has been here. I can feel it." "Feeling is not evidence, Lieutenant." "No," Hayes agreed. "But evidence has a way of turning up, and when it does, I will be back." After the soldiers left, Marcus knew that their time was running out. Hayes would keep coming back, keep searching, until he found what he was looking for, and eventually, he would succeed. That night, as they lay together in the big bed that had once been Sarah's, Marcus broached the subject they had both been avoiding. "We need to leave," he said quietly. "Hayes will not give up, and it is only a matter of time before he catches us." Ayanna was quiet for a long moment, her head resting on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Where would we go?" she asked finally. "West," Marcus said. "California, maybe Oregon. Somewhere we can start over, where nobody knows who we are or where we came from." "You would leave your ranch? Your home?" Marcus tightened his arms around her. "You are my home now," he said simply. In the darkness, Ayanna smiled, though he could not see it. She had never imagined that she would find such love, such acceptance, in the arms of a white man. But Marcus had proven himself to be different from the others, a man who saw her as a person, rather than a problem to be solved. "When?" she asked. "Soon," Marcus replied. before the spring brings more soldiers and more questions. They began making preparations quietly, selling off livestock and converting everything of value into cash and supplies that could be easily transported. Marcus told anyone who asked that he was thinking of expanding his operation, maybe buying land further west. But their careful plans were shattered on a warm March morning, when Lieutenant Hayes arrived with 2 full companies of cavalry and a warrant for Marcus's arrest. "Marcus Sullivan," Hayes announced, his voice carrying across the yard. "You are under arrest for harboring a fugitive and obstruction of justice." Marcus stepped out onto his porch, his hands raised but his expression defiant. Behind him, Ayanna watched from the window, her heart breaking as she realized what was happening. "You have no proof," Marcus called out. "Actually, we do," Hayes replied with a cold smile. "Turns out your girlfriend has been seen in town. Several witnesses identified her as the woman in our wanted posters, wearing a blue dress that matches the description of clothing reported stolen from your house." Marcus felt his heart sink. In their careful plans, they had overlooked something so simple. Ayanna had been to town only once, to buy supplies for their journey, but it had been enough. As the soldiers moved in to arrest him, Marcus caught sight of Ayanna's face in the window. She was crying, but there was also determination in her expression. He knew what she was thinking, and he tried to shake his head, to tell her no without words. But before he could stop her, the back door of the house opened, and Ayanna stepped out into the yard. She walked forward with her head held high, her hands at her sides, making no attempt to run or hide. "I am the one you want," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Let him go." Hayes smiled triumphantly. "Ayanna of the White Mountain Apache, you are under arrest for the murder of 3 United States soldiers." As the soldiers moved to restrain her, Ayanna looked back at Marcus one last time. In that look was all the love they had shared, all the hope they had built together, and all the sorrow of a dream cut short. "I will find you," Marcus called out as they led him away in chains. "Whatever it takes, I will find you." Ayanna nodded, tears streaming down her face, and then they were both gone, separated by the machinery of justice and the prejudices of their time. But love, Marcus had learned, was stronger than chains and more enduring than hate. Somewhere, somehow, he would keep his promise. And until that day came, he would carry her memory like a flame in the darkness, a reminder that even in the harshest winter, spring would always come again.